They used to say the old observatory at the top of Warden Hill never truly shut its eyes. Even when the town below sank into darkness, its rusted dome still turned, slow and patient, as if the sky itself had forgotten how to rest. For years I believed it was just another story, a myth told by locals who needed something to fear above them. But rumors have gravity, and this one pulled me in. People claimed that on moonless nights the stars above the dome shifted, sliding out of place, crawling across the heavens like restless sparks. No one could explain it, and no one stayed long enough to try. I should have ignored it, yet curiosity has a pull stronger than reason. It began when I found a fragment of an astronomer's journal buried in an online archive, the last entry written in trembling ink back in 1982. It read, "They are no longer fixed. The stars breathe. I must listen." 2 nights later, I was climbing the road to Warden Hill with a flashlight and more confidence than sense. The road was ancient, cracked stone glinting under a tired moon. Fog drifted like slow smoke, wrapping around the trees until their branches looked skeletal. My boots scraped against gravel, every sound swallowed too quickly by the mist. Somewhere ahead, a low metallic hum vibrated through the air, steady, mechanical, wrong. I told myself it was the wind, but the lie sounded thin even to me. When the fog thinned, the observatory appeared, a dark mass on the hilltop, dome half open like an unblinking eye. For a moment I swore the stars above it shifted again, tiny movements against the black sky, deliberate and alive. The gate was chained but fragile with rust. One hard shove and the metal screamed open. Inside, weeds grew tall between the cracks of an old walkway. Dead cables snaked along the ground, disappearing into the walls. Each step felt too loud, too certain, as if the night itself wanted me to walk quieter. At the main door, the air smelled of iron and rain. I pushed, and the hinges shrieked. Darkness poured out, thick and warm, like breath exhaled from a long-sealed tomb. The main chamber swallowed my light. The curved walls still carried faded murals of constellations, their paint peeled into ghostly patterns. Shards of glass littered the floor, reflecting my flashlight in nervous flashes. Then the beam caught the telescope. It was enormous, metal bones reaching toward the torn hatch above, aimed straight at the stars. I stood beneath it, silent. The air was too still. Then came a click, metal shifting far overhead, followed by a slow, deliberate groan. The telescope moved. I felt the vibration through the floor. There was no power here, no reason it should move at all, yet it adjusted by a few degrees as if tracking something invisible. The sight froze me. A layer of dust drifted from the rafters like ash, settling around my boots. A corroded plaque near the control console bore a single name, Dr. Elias Harrow, Chief Astronomer 1963 to 1982. The same man from the journal. Beside the plaque, an open notebook lay half-eaten by moisture. Faded lines repeated down the page, "They move when watched. They move when watched." I whispered the words, and the building seemed to respond. The beams creaked overhead, a sigh rolling through the metal like something waking after a century of sleep. Then I heard the hum again, deeper this time, rising from the floor beneath me. It matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. Lightning flashed outside, flooding the dome in white light. For an instant the telescope's lens flared with impossible brightness. When the flash died, a faint blue glow remained inside the glass, swirling like ink suspended in water. Against my better judgment I leaned closer. Through the eyepiece, the night sky was alive. The constellations rippled, bending, sliding into new positions like a living map. Stars pulsed as if breathing, their light expanding and contracting in perfect cadence. None of it obeyed physics. My pulse stuttered. The hum in the floor deepened until I could feel it in my teeth. Then the dome above me began to turn. Rusted gears screamed, dust raining down. My flashlight flickered as though the air had turned electric. I stumbled back, staring up at the massive shell rotating under its own power. Clouds rolled across the sky, covering the moon, yet through that broken opening the stars still burned, bright, clear, shifting. I felt the weight of them pressing down, like unseen eyes studying me. The console lights flickered alive, green, amber, blue, breathing in uneven rhythm. "Who's running this place?" I muttered, half hoping silence would answer. Instead, a single metallic clack echoed behind me. I turned. The heavy door I'd entered through had sealed itself. The handle was gone, sheared off clean. My throat tightened. Wind roared through the open dome, carrying whispers that weren't wind. They looped in fragments, like coordinates or names, overlapping in distorted cadence. Each repetition nudged the telescope a fraction, as if receiving instructions. A realization cut through me. It wasn't tracking stars anymore. It was aligning to something else, something moving. I backed toward the center of the room. The eyepiece pulsed twice, slow and patient, like a creature breathing in its sleep. The blue light swelled until it painted my hands and face in cold color. Then the murals shifted. I swear they moved, the painted constellations twisting into shapes of eyes. Dozens of them. Watching. Panic finally broke through the awe. I stumbled down the stairwell toward the lower level, the hum following like a second heartbeat. The air grew warmer and thicker, smelling of ozone and burnt dust. At the bottom, a steel door bore a rusted warning, "Power grid, do not enter during rotation." I hesitated, listening to the machinery above grind in steady circles, then pushed the door open. Inside, ancient generators sat in rows, silent tombs coated in grime, except one. A tiny red light blinked faintly on its panel, the pulse of something that should have been dead. I stepped closer, my breath shallow. The blinking slowed until it matched my pulse, then quickened, sinking to my rhythm as if studying it. The hum filled the room, wrapping around me like invisible wires. I looked up through a maintenance hatch and saw a sliver of sky through the layers of metal. The stars I'd seen earlier were moving again, drifting across the narrow gap in the same tempo as the flashing light. That was when I finally understood Dr. Harrow's words. The stars weren't moving because of the telescope. The telescope was moving because of them. And above me, beyond the clouds, something vast was still turning, still watching, still awake. The hum had become a pulse now, steady and slow, rising through the metal floor like a heartbeat echoing from the Earth's core. I stood in front of the single working generator, its tiny red light blinking in rhythm with my chest. Every flash painted the walls a deep crimson, and between each pulse, I could almost hear breathing. The air vibrated softly, as if the building itself were alive and listening. I reached for the switch to kill the current, but before my fingers touched the lever, the hum deepened into a low, rolling note that rattled my teeth. The light turned from red to pale blue. A voice, faint as wind, whispered through the static. I couldn't make out words, but it sounded like a countdown, or perhaps coordinates repeated again and again in an ancient tongue. I pulled back, trembling. The air had grown colder, sharp enough to sting my skin. My breath came out in thin clouds. Then, without warning, the walls began to glow, thin lines of light tracing through the cracks in the concrete, spreading upward like veins under skin. The same constellation patterns I had seen painted upstairs were now forming on the walls themselves, shimmering with faint blue phosphorescence. Each time one completed its shape, the hum beneath me pulsed harder, almost as if the building were reacting to recognition. I turned to run back up the stairs, but the way I had come was gone. The stairwell stretched upward endlessly, swallowing my flashlight beam into darkness. Somewhere above, gears turned, slow and deliberate, accompanied by the sound of metal scraping stone. The dome was still moving. I forced myself to climb, one trembling step after another, my hand brushing along the cold railing slick with condensation. The higher I went, the louder the sound became, no longer a simple hum, but a layered symphony of mechanical breath and cosmic rhythm. It was like standing inside the chest of something enormous, something alive. When I reached the main floor, the air had changed completely. Thin mist rolled across the tiles, lit faintly by a blue glow that seeped from every crack. The telescope towered in the center, its lens shimmering like an open eye. The control panels flickered erratically, switching between colors, as if trying to communicate. I approached slowly. On the nearest desk lay a journal, its pages half stuck together from moisture. Across the top was scrawled in a frantic hand, "The stars have synchronized. The observatory breathes with them." I flipped through the pages. Sketches of constellations filled every margin, lines connecting impossible points, shapes that didn't exist on any known chart. Each drawing ended with the same phrase written over and over again, "The pulse beneath the sky." The handwriting grew erratic near the end, words tilting, letters breaking apart as though written in panic. One line stood out, underlined twice, "When the pulse aligns with your heart, you are no longer watching. You are being watched." A metallic shudder rippled through the building, making the floor tilt slightly under my feet. Dust drifted down from the ceiling like pale snow. My flashlight flickered, dimmed, then went out completely. The only illumination came from the telescope, which was now glowing brighter than ever. I felt drawn to it, not by curiosity, but by something magnetic, something ancient and wordless. The hum shifted pitch again, becoming a low tone that vibrated deep inside my bones. The console lights blinked in patterns, 3 slow, 2 fast, repeating endlessly. A message, perhaps. I stepped closer, reaching for the main control lever, but before I could touch it, the telescope turned on its own. The entire dome creaked, aligning perfectly with a patch of sky just above the clouds. My ears popped from the sudden pressure change. Then, without warning, a beam of light shot through the eyepiece, silent, pure, colorless. It wasn't light from the stars. It was something else entirely, a reflection of something unseen. I stumbled back, shielding my eyes, and when I looked again, the floor was covered in moving shapes. Tiny specks of light crawled across the ground like fireflies trapped in tar. They formed lines, constellations, then scattered, reforming into new patterns. Each movement corresponded with a pulse from the generator below. The observatory was syncing with the sky, or maybe the sky was syncing with it. I could no longer tell which was leading. From somewhere behind the telescope came the sound of slow footsteps. I froze. The rhythm matched the pulse exactly. Step, hum, each perfectly timed. Hello. My voice came out small, swallowed by the vast chamber. The footsteps stopped. Silence stretched until I could hear only the blood rushing in my ears. Then, from the edge of the platform, something whispered. It was the same voice I had heard in the static downstairs, clearer now, but layered with another beneath it, like two people speaking through each other. Do you hear it too? I spun, shining my light toward the sound. The beam landed on a figure half hidden behind the telescope base. A man, thin and motionless, wearing a tattered white lab coat. His face was turned upward, eyes wide, reflecting the glow of the moving stars. His lips moved slowly, silently at first, then words emerged, broken and rhythmic. They breathe through us. I stepped closer, my heart hammering. Dr. Harrow? He turned his head toward me, but his eyes didn't focus. His voice had no breath in it, as though carried by the hum itself. Once you listen, you cannot stop hearing. I blinked, and he was gone. Only the echo of his words lingered in the vibrating air. My hands trembled violently. The telescope began to rotate again, faster this time, its gears shrieking in agony. The entire dome shuddered as if straining against the movement. I fell to my knees, gripping the floor as the vibration grew unbearable. The hum deepened until it was no longer sound but sensation, waves rippling through my chest. The stars above the opening shifted in response, moving faster, twisting into spirals that no longer resembled constellations. Then the light returned, bursting from the eyepiece like liquid silver. It spilled across the walls, washing over every surface, and when it touched me, the air crackled. My skin tingled, as though invisible static crawled beneath it. The room flickered, and for a heartbeat, everything changed. The observatory was no longer decayed. It was whole, pristine, glowing with instruments alive and working. Scientists moved between consoles. I could hear the chatter of voices, the clatter of tools, the ticking of old clocks. The year wasn't now, it was decades before, perhaps 1970 or earlier. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the vision collapsed. Dust, ruin, and silence returned. My knees buckled. I gasped for air, and the hum quieted to a whisper. I realized then that I hadn't just witnessed history, I had stepped into it, even if only for a moment. The observatory had shown me what it remembered. And the stars above, still shifting slowly, had been watching all along. The hum never truly stopped, it only waited. Even when the air fell still, I could feel it trembling beneath the floor like a living heartbeat buried under stone. The telescope loomed in the center of the dome, its lens fixed upward toward a patch of sky that looked too bright, too alive. I wanted to believe the nightmare had peaked, that the strange pulse and the ghost of Dr. Harrow were tricks of exhaustion, but the air itself said otherwise. Every breath tasted metallic, every shadow moved with its own quiet intent. I staggered toward the main console. The journal I had dropped earlier lay open, pages fluttering though there was no wind. The words on them were changing, rewriting themselves in the faint blue light. The eye opens when it is seen. The sentence repeated until the letters blurred together. I slammed the notebook shut, my pulse racing. Somewhere above, the dome shuddered, metal scraping against metal, until the hatch widened completely. Cold air poured in, carrying the clean scent of rain and iron. The stars overhead were moving again, faster now, bending into a slow whirlpool of light. The telescope's lens glowed with liquid silver. For a heartbeat it looked almost beautiful, like the eye of a god waking from a dream. Then it began to expand, stretching outward, its reflection deepening until I could see movement inside. The stars weren't outside anymore, they were within the lens, swirling like living things. My flashlight flickered once and died. The only illumination came from that impossible eye staring down at me. The hum grew louder, sinking through the walls, rising through my bones. My vision blurred. Every pulse aligned with my heartbeat, and I realized with horror that the observatory had learned my rhythm completely. The machinery no longer merely reacted to me, it anticipated me, syncing every vibration to the pattern of my body. The whole structure breathed in time with my lungs. I whispered, "Stop," but the dome answered with another groan and a rush of moving air. The telescope tilted slowly, lowering toward me as if acknowledging the call of something that wasn't quite human anymore. I stumbled backward, but the floor shifted beneath my feet. The tiles rippled, soft as water, and faint constellations shimmered through them. Each star in the pattern pulsed once before vanishing, replaced by another, until I realized the lights weren't random, they were forming a shape. It was me. My silhouette outlined in light, standing in the very spot I occupied. The moment I lifted my hand, the image mirrored the motion perfectly. The building was mapping me, drawing me into its design. The air crackled. A thin beam of light shot from the telescope's lens, tracing across the floor to meet my feet. It climbed my legs, my chest, my face, pausing at my eyes. For a second the world vanished. I was weightless, suspended in blackness filled with moving stars. They turned slowly, rearranging themselves until they resembled not constellations but faces, thousands of pale faces flickering like dying suns. They whispered in layered voices, "Look closer. Once you see, you belong." My body snapped back to the observatory floor with a jolt. I collapsed, gasping. The air smelled like rain and static. The dome was still open, but the stars were no longer distant points. They were clustered, pressing closer, swirling as though the universe itself had tilted toward this single hill. The telescope shook violently. Bolts rattled loose, falling around me like hail. The hum had become a roar, deep and resonant, echoing far beyond the range of hearing. I crawled toward the stairs, desperate to escape, but the steps twisted impossibly, curving back upward instead of down. No matter how far I moved, I ended where I began, beneath that unblinking lens. Then I saw him again. Dr. Harrow stood at the far end of the platform, his coat billowing in the cold wind. His face was calm, almost reverent. "You shouldn't have listened," he said softly, voice layered with the same undertone as the hum. "Once the stars know your rhythm, they remember you." He lifted his hand, and for the first time I noticed the faint glow beneath his skin, lines of light pulsing like constellations. They spread across his face, tracing every vein, every scar, until he looked less human and more like a map of the night sky. "They learned me long ago," he whispered. "Now they learn you." Before I could answer, the telescope convulsed. The lens dilated like an iris widening, and light flooded the room. The pressure knocked me backward. My ears rang, but through the sound I heard the distinct beat of the pulse, steady, measured, infinite. I dragged myself toward the exit door, but it was gone, replaced by smooth metal that reflected my terrified face. The hum spoke through the walls now, a deep voice without language. My name echoed within it, stretched and distorted until it became part of the rhythm itself. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley though no clouds had gathered. The stars began to twist faster, spiraling downward like a storm inverted. Each one left a trail of faint blue fire until the entire sky looked like a whirlpool of light. The telescope followed the motion exactly, keeping perfect pace, and for an instant I understood the terrible symmetry. The observatory wasn't watching the stars. The stars were using it to watch us. Desperation gave me strength. I sprinted toward the maintenance hatch, the same one I had seen from below. My hands slipped on the rusted ladder as I climbed down into darkness. The hum followed, muffled but relentless, vibrating through every rung. At the bottom the generator room pulsed like a living heart. The single blue light that had blinked before was now solid, burning bright. I reached for the lever again, teeth clenched, and yanked it down. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. For a brief moment I thought it had worked. Then the floor began to breathe. The walls expanded and contracted in slow rhythm, dust falling like ash from the ceiling. The blue glow didn't fade, it spread, seeping through the cracks, crawling up the walls toward me. I turned and ran. The stairwell twisted, reshaping itself as I climbed. Steps melted into slopes, railings bent like soft wire. The hum returned, louder than before, shaking the air itself. My legs burned, lungs screaming for air. At last, a faint rectangle of light appeared ahead, the doorway to the outside world. I lunged toward it, bursting through as cold night air slammed into my face. The observatory stood behind me, motionless, silent once again. The dome was still open, the telescope still pointed skyward. For a long moment I simply stood there, breathing hard, half expecting the hum to chase me down the hill. It didn't. The stars above were still, innocent, ordinary. I almost laughed from relief. Then one of them moved. Just a tiny shift, but enough to freeze the sound in my throat. Another followed. Then another. Within seconds, the constellations rearranged themselves, forming a single shape, a tall figure, arms outstretched, gazing downward. I ran until the road bent out of sight. Even now, nights later, the image refuses to leave my mind. When I close my eyes, I can still feel the pulse inside me, beating in time with something far away, something watching. The observatory may have released me, but the rhythm remains. Sometimes, when the world grows quiet, I hear it again, the low hum beneath the stars, patient and eternal. So if you ever find yourself beneath a restless sky and notice a single star drift out of place, don't stare too long. Some lights aren't meant to be followed, and some eyes aren't meant to meet yours. Subscribe for more stories whispered by the dark, because some skies never stop watching.